Good morning and welcome to day 34 of Bible in a Year as we explore from Genesis to Revelation in 365 days. We are following together the Adventure Timeline by Jeff Cavins. My name is Pastor Jay Lutz, and we're going through this time the period of Egypt and Exodus. Today we're going to be reading Exodus 12, Leviticus 9, and Psalm 114. Exodus 12, we talk about the last plague, plague number 10, the death of the firstborn, and what God has the Israelites prepared to do. And this is the time of Passover, where the angel of death passes over the house of the people, and because they put blood of the lamb around their lintels or doorframe. And we see Leviticus 9, the priests of Aaron begin their ministry. Remember last time we saw their ordination, and now they're beginning. They're being installed, and they're getting used to all the tasks that they're going to be doing. And Psalm 114 is a psalm we do not particularly know who writes it. Sometimes it's attributed to King David, and it's a psalm of praise. So let's get into it. Exodus chapter 12. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, "This month is to be for you the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one from each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people there are. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animal you choose must be a year-old, male, without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the people, the community of Israel, might slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lamb. That same night they are to eat the meat roasted over the fire with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or cooked in water, but roast it over an open fire, head, legs, and inner parts. Do not leave any of it till morning. If some is left till morning, you must burn it. This is how you are to eat. With your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. On that same night I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn, both man and animal, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. This is the day you are to commemorate. For the generations to come you shall celebrate as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance. For 7 days you are to eat bread made without yeast, and on the first day remove the yeast from your houses. For whoever eats anything with yeast in it, from the first day through the 7, must be cut off from Israel. On the first day hold a sacred assembly, and another one on the 7th day. Do not work at all on these days, except to prepare food for everyone to eat. That is all you may do. Celebrate the feast of unleavened bread, because it was on this very day that I brought your division out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. In the first month you are to eat bread made without yeast, from the evening of the 14th day until the evening of the 21st day. For 7 days no yeast is to be found in your houses, and whoever eats anything with yeast in it must be cut off from your community of Israel, whether he is an alien or native born. Eat nothing made with yeast. Wherever you live, you must eat unleavened bread. Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go at once and select the animal for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood in the basin, and put some of the blood on the tops on both sides of the doorframe. Not only of you shall go out to the door of this house until morning. When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on tops and side of the doorframe, and will pass over the doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your house and strike you down. Obey these instructions, a lasting ordinance for you and your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you as he promised, observe this ceremony. And when your children ask you, what does this ceremony mean? You tell them, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of Israelites in Egypt and spared our homes when he struck down the Egyptians. Then the people bowed down and worshipped. The Israelites did just what the Lord commanded from Moses and Aaron. At midnight the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoners, who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. During the night Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds as you said, and go, and also bless me. And the Egyptians urged the people to hurry, to leave the country. For other ways, they said, we will all die. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added, and carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs, wrapping in clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed, and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold, and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people, and they gave them what they asked for, so they plundered the Egyptians. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. There were about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. Many other people went up with them, as well as large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. With the dough they had brought from Egypt, they baked cakes of unleavened bread. The dough was without yeast because they had been driven out of Egypt and did not have time to prepare food for themselves. Now the length of time the Israelite people lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of 430 years, to the very day, all the Lord's divisions left Egypt, because the Lord kept vigil that night to bring them out of Egypt. And on this night all the Israelites are to keep vigil to honor the Lord for the generations to come. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, These are the regulations for the Passover. No foreigner is to eat of it, and slaves you have bought may eat of it after you have circumcised him. But a temporary resident and a hired worker may not eat of it. It must be eaten inside one house. Take none of the meat outside the house. Do not break any of the bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate it. An alien living among you who wants to celebrate the Lord's Passover must have all the males in his household circumcised. Then he may take part, like one born in the land. No uncircumcised male may eat of it. The same law applies to the native born and to the alien living among you. All the Israelites did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, and on that very day the Lord brought the Israelites out of Egypt by their divisions. Ends the first reading. Our second reading comes from Leviticus chapter 9. On the 8th day Moses summoned Aaron and his sons and elders of Israel. He said to Aaron, Take a bull calf from your sin offering and a ram for your burnt offering, both without defect, and present them before the Lord. Then say to the Israelites, Take a male goat for a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both a year old and without defect, for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for a fellowship offering, to sacrifice before the Lord, together with grain offerings mixed with oil. For today the Lord will appear to you. They took the things Moses commanded to the front of the tent of meeting, and the entire assembly came near and stood before the Lord. Then Moses said, This is what the Lord has commanded you to do, so that the glory of the Lord might appear to you. Moses said to Aaron, Come to the altar and sacrifice your sin offering and your burnt offering. Make atonements for yourself and the people. Sacrifice the offering that is for the people, and make atonement for them, as the Lord has commanded. So Aaron came to the altar and slaughtered the calf as a sin offering for himself. His sons brought the blood to him, and he dipped his finger into the blood and put it on the horns of the altar. The rest of the blood he poured out at the base of the altar. On the altar he burned the fat, the kidneys and the coverings of the liver for the sin offering, as the Lord commanded Moses. The flesh and the hide he burned up outside the camp. Then he slaughtered the burnt offering. His sons handed him the blood, and he sprinkled it against the altar on all sides. They handed him the burnt offering, piece by piece, including the head, and he burned them on the altar. He washed the inner parts and the legs and burned them on the top of the burnt offering on the altar. Aaron then brought the offering that was for the people. He took the goat for the people's sin offering and slaughtered it, and offered it for a sin offering, as he did with the first one. He brought the burnt offering and offered it in the prescribed way. He also brought the grain offering, took a handful of it, and burned it on the altar in addition to the morning's burnt offering. He slaughtered the ox and ram as a fellowship offering for the people. His son handed him the blood, and he sprinkled against the altar all sides. But the fat portions of the ox and the ram, the fat tail, the layer of fat, the kidneys, and the coverings of the liver, these they laid on the breast, and then Aaron burnt the fat on the altar. Aaron waved the breasts and the right thigh before the Lord as a wave offering, as Moses commanded. Then Aaron lifted his hands towards the people and blessed them. And after having sacrificed the sin offerings, the burnt offerings, and the fellowship offerings, he stepped down. Moses and Aaron then went into the tent of meeting. When they came out, they blessed the people, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. Fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat portions on the altar. And when all the people saw it, they shouted for joy and fell face down. That's our second reading. Our last reading in Psalm 114. When Israel came out of Egypt, the house of Jacob, from a people of foreign tongue, Judah became God's sanctuary, Israel his dominion. The sea looked and fled. The Jordan turned back. The mountains skipped like rams, the hills like lambs. Why was it, O sea, that you fled? O Jordan, that you turned back? You mountains, that you skipped like rams, and hills like lambs? Tremble, O earth, at the presence of the Lord, at the presence of the God of Jacob, who turned the rocks into a pool, the hard rocks into springs of water. Here ends the reading. It's a beautiful imagery of how even the earth itself celebrates the Lord our God. This is pretty incredible. The mountains skipped like rams, the hills like lambs. The Jordan turned back, and the seas looked and fled. All things are in fear of the Lord our God. It's a beautiful thing. Our next reading we talked about was Leviticus and the ordination of Aaron and his sons. There's a beautiful imagery of them celebrating at the tent of meeting. And then this incredible thing where once they were done all that they had to do, they went into the tent of meeting before the Lord. And then when they appeared, it says fire came out of the presence. And the Lord consumed the burnt offerings. And all the people saw it and shouted for joy and fell face down because they were, I'm sure, afraid is afraid. It could be. But what amazing celebration they had. This is when we follow in the ways of God, there is much celebration, but also fear, because God is great. He's beyond all things. So we celebrate that. And lastly, we see this 10th plague, and God prepares the people for Passover. That he is sparing them and their children, and he does not spare the Egyptians because they have disobeyed him. And this is an affront to to Pharaoh himself, because Pharaoh was seen as the very top god, the son of Ra, and he is exalted above, kind of like we see with God. God exalts his son above, that he might be the God that is the God above all gods. And we see this as Pharaoh in the Egyptian system, and yet God brings death to him to make him known that he is not the God above all gods, that he also is in submission to the Lord our God. And we might kind of remember that God is above all things, even the ones that we place as our own gods, like the Pharaoh, and that even them, they're in submission of the true God, the one God, the only God, our Lord. Thank you for joining me today. I pray that you might pray for me as we go through this, as I pray for you, that you might learn through the Bible that there is no height nor depth that God cannot, he's in the heavens and he's in the depths and he's everywhere. And there's no way for us to get out of the presence of God, but that we might embrace it, that we might exalt, and like the people of God, that we might shout for joy, but at the same time be a little fearful that we know that God is a powerful God and that he's beyond us, and that we are to bring him worship and praise, like it says in 1:14. May you have a blessed day, and may you be a blessing to others.